Greeting pilots and welcome to Fly's Flight Academy. My name is Kovakis, otherwise known as Flyteco and Sotor, and today we're going to be continuing on with our ship breakdowns. Today we're going to be talking about our second gunship, the Comet Breaker. This is essentially the hybrid damage platform for our gunships. What that means is it not only has double railguns, but it does have double torpedoes, which is actually kind of an interesting build. But this is the least mobile of our gunship options, and that is mostly reflected in the fact that its shield options are fairly restrictive. So when we get there, we'll get there. Oh, I actually put a little blurb about the double torpedoes, but I actually said it anyways. Of note, actually, though, the double torpedoes does have kind of interesting implications for what this was designed for. I actually have builds for the torpedoes. I'll kind of briefly skim over them in this video, but they're going to be in my build guides for sure. So look out for those if you're actually interested in trying out a proper torpedo Comet Breaker. I actually kind of dig it a little bit, and personally believe it is actually a pretty solid siege option. So when we get there, we'll talk about that a little bit more. Once again, the number one tip I can give for gunships, and I'm going to say this every gunship video, is that you can zoom out in your railgun by just simply scrolling out. This will zoom out your reticle and give you a wider field of view and make it way easier to aim. Moving into the components of this here Comet Breaker, once again, you only have two options here. And unfortunately, one of them is terrible, and one of them is the one that you're probably going to be taking. I wish this was light laser cannons instead of laser cannons, but unfortunately, we can't have nice things here. So heavy lasers is the option of choice. Again, I kind of wish these were burst laser. I really wish this was just coral loadout, honestly, because the other two gunships have really solid primaries, and this one's kind of left in the dust, which sucks because I really like the Comet Breaker. It's pretty cool in design, and I mean, overall, it's just a neat ship. But that said, heavy laser still really good. So it's a longer range option, which is okay. You kind of don't want a long range. You don't want a long range primary, but since the other one isn't as good, it kind of makes it weird. So what this is really just doing is it's forcing you into defending yourself from longer ranges. This means you're going to have to snap out of your railguns if you're running the double railgun platform that much earlier, unless you really believe in yourself, in which case, by all means, snapshot away. But I do believe that you're going to be stuck in a bit more awkward situations with the heavy lasers. But a lot of the high-skilled pilots can actually circumvent this with proper railgun shots, as I stated, by doing those snapshots. And you can kill someone before they even get within range of your heavy lasers, which is kind of the goal. You really don't want to be firing your primaries on this ship. They're kind of weak, to say the least. That said, for your Tier 4 and Tier 5 options, you're going to be running Ignore Armor for Tier 4, and at Tier 5, you're going to be running Shield Piercing. Moving on to the interesting bits of the Comet Breaker, your double secondaries. In here, you have the Proton Thermark Torpedo, and then you have Slug Railgun, you have Slug and Plasma. These are the same builds, but in different ways. I think that must have been the joke here, because Proton is essentially the torpedo version of Slug Railgun, and Thermite is essentially the torpedo version of Plasma Railgun. So I think I'm pretty sure that's why, yeah, that's probably why these are that way. That said, these are still solid options. I'm a firm believer that you can get away with Plasma Slug, and honestly, some variants of the torpedo railgun combo. I'm going to talk about the railguns first. So in this slot, I do designate this as my plasma slot, as I believe it is my starter weapon. Essentially what that means is I'm priming as much damage as I can to remove as much shield as possible, since it doesn't have ions, to lead the way for my slug to do as much damage as possible straight to hull. For tier 4, I'm going to be taking improved accuracy and tracking, and for tier 5, I'm going to be taking intense plasma to just get that little bit more burn damage out of my shots. For the second slot, I'm running my slug railgun. This is your burst damage option. At tier 4, you're going to be taking improved damage to hull. At tier 5, you're going to be taking increased damage. And what I'm going to note this build here. I actually do believe that the double torpedo build isn't actually as bad as it sounds. I believe that because of this ship's lack of mobility, it being a torpedo siege engine is actually really good. And when we get into shields, I'll kind of add on to that, but essentially what Proton Thermite is providing you a lot of burst and bleed damage, and that's really kind of going to help you solidify that siege potential that I'm kind of quoting here. What Thermite does, we're going to ignore the damage reduction and shield piercing here because Protons doesn't benefit from that. Of note, I do believe there is actually a place for a Thermite plasma build. Essentially, it's the double burn like pain build, where you're relying on a bit more shield pen, and actually instead of taking a intense plasma, you do take the shield piercing here, and super like triple down on that, and just get a ton of damage to just blast straight through their shields. So it's pretty solid. But in terms of the double torpedo build, what Thermite is doing, it's filling the center with plasma essentially. It is priming as much damage as you can to actually, yeah, it's okay. Yeah, it is still doing the same thing. It is priming the ship to essentially have. It's not priming shield damage because Proton does hull damage. But what it's doing is it's priming that dot to just sit there and tick away and remove their shields. And then once the dot is close to finishing, it's going to give you that extra little bleed damage that from that 150% extra damage that it could do to hulls. And it's going to tick over, and ideally it's going to finish the enemies. Obviously in practice, you're going to have your teammates shooting at enemies. So with good target prioritization, you can get a lot of value out of Thermite by letting your allies benefit from the essentially debuff that this provides. And that's pretty much what you want to do with this if you're running it in the double torpedo fashion. You're going to be wanting to just launch thermites and protons at people until they just hate you. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just kind of a different way to play. As such, you're going to be taking increased firing arc for both. On protons as well. They both have the same tier 4, which is kind of nice. You're going to be taking increased firing arc because they basically have the same... Actually, they have the exact same firing arc, so that's nice. I'm pretty sure they have the exact same reload, too. Yeah, exact same reload, exact same lock-on, exact same everything, essentially. As I stated in, I believe the... Oh man, I don't remember what video it was. Whichever video had both of them in it. They're essentially the same torpedo, just they do the damage differently. For tier 5 on your Thermite, you're going to take increased duration. This is honestly to just extend that time that the bleed has. The extra 15% damage does have a place here, but I don't think it's good enough since it's only on the bleed, I'm pretty sure. It just says additional 15% damage every 15 seconds. So I'm assuming that is on the bleed because it wouldn't start doing that 15% when it hits. So an extra 15%, I believe, comes out to about 600 damage on the bleed, which is okay. The extra 3 seconds, I don't actually know what that comes out to be. I've never done the math for Thermite, just because I don't necessarily use it for the full duration damage. I use it for the execute damage. So, unfortunately, I don't have the math for you there. If I remember, I might put it in like a text somewhere to have how much damage they both do, but for the most part, you'll want that increased duration to have the debuff last longer and have the bleed last longer. On your protons, you're going to want to take the... Ooh, man, this is actually a rough decision. So first things first, if you're running this build, oh, I already have Jorgen. That's not correct. I shouldn't have Jorgen here. I definitely should have... I want to say it was B3. but you're going to run Jorgen. So actually, these ammo values are correct. So I am kind of... Okay, hold on. Let's see. It's flat 4. 10. I'm kind of on board with running increased ammo here. No. I still think you have to run the increased range. This is going to bring your range up to 1380 or to 13.8, which is really strong. These actually gained 2,000 meters from just being on gunships, which is kind of cool. So that's why I do believe that there's the siege engine potential there, because you still have pretty decent long range, and these are two really good torpedo options. So honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world. I did just really want to touch on that. So I do think that there's potential. And as I stated, there's the thermite plasma build that focuses in on that shield pin, which is for that you'd probably want to have Nadia as your co-pilot instead of Akavi. You are losing the accuracy, but that doesn't matter when you're not firing railguns. So take the shield piercing and gain an extra 18% on top of the 12% on top of the... Oh man, that actually crazy. So just to preface, I've never tried that build before, but I conceptualized it and thought it was kind of cool. But now that I think about it, this is 50% shield bleed, so maybe that actually is very much so a viable option. I was kind of joking, but I do actually think it is a solid choice if you want to run it. But for the most part, the slug plasma is going to get you a lot further in terms of just raw consistency. Moving on to shields, there is unfortunately some weird options in here. Of note, the one you're going to be choosing most consistently is actually feedback. This is just because your defense isn't really strong, and being you don't have the distortion field in here, you don't actually have two missile breaks, you only have the one from barrel. So you really do need to try and kill people really quickly. So feedback actually gets that done. This is primarily on the railgun build. I honestly think on the missile build, Fortress Shield is your better option. Just because you're really going to be sitting in place anyways, so you might as well have the extra huge shield boost and sensor dampening. Honestly, you already have a lot of sensor range to my knowledge. Yes, you're already at 15,000, so you're already well within your missile range. And the reason you take range on these normally is to extend the distance at which you can see people to prime your railgun shots. But if you're not using railguns, 15,000 meters is totally fine. And then you take extra sensor dampening on top of the Fortress Shield's dampening to essentially hide yourself away while you're firing missiles, because I believe it equates out to 8,000 dampening. I don't quite know the Fortress Shield number. Okay, 7,500. More or less, you're pretty much invisible to people, which is kind of cool. It obviously doesn't quite work out that way in practice, just because dampening is kind of a weird thing to look at. Of note as well, if you are running the double torpedo, you're going to be swapping to munitions capacitor, give you more ammo. So again, that ammo number was actually wrong. You're going to have like 20 something shots on both. So I lied. They're actually really good. Again, I'm finding out more things. I'm learning with you guys because the Comet Breaker is actually a quite intricate ship. It's got a lot more nuance than the Coral does. Just because the Coral is so straightforward, it teaches you gunships in the most raw way. But Comet Breaker teaches you gunships in the least efficient way of forcing you to do weird things to make the ship effective. That said, for tier 3 on the Fortress Shield, you're going to take increased duration. If you're running the torpedo build, if you're running the railgun build, you're going to take the increased crit. I know it sounds funny, but there is a chance you crit, and there is a chance this does a lot of damage, so it's pretty worth it. Moving on to engines, like I said, you really only have one option. This is because, once again, I don't know why gunships are cursed like this. They only have one missile break option ever for some reason. I think the exclusion is the Condor, which has two, but for the most part, they all have one, which kind of blows. I really wish interdiction or rotational gave it. Power converters are always terrible, so please never run them. So yeah, you'll use barrel roll essentially to escape. Like the Coral, you really want to wait till the last second to use your barrel roll. That way you can get as much value and distance away from it. But outside of that, that is honestly pretty much it for the Comet Breaker. I've I'm kind of realizing now that I did lie a little bit about the gunships. I'm actually noticing that they're a lot shorter than I thought they would be, just because all the gunships kind of have the same tips. Realistically, a lot of what comes to being a good gunship player is learning your positioning. And if you can position yourself well and learn how to, if essentially the way you need to learn gunship, there is actually priorities in the way that you want to sort of fudge your learning curve. The first thing you need to learn is accuracy. You need to learn to aim your guns. That is the most important thing when running railgun builds. If you're running the torpedo build, mostly on the Comet Breaker, I'm pretty sure, yeah, the Comet Breaker is the only one you actually run double missiles on. So the exception is exclusively the Comet Breaker. But on every other gunship, you need to learn how to aim well with your railgun, being both at long ranges and short ranges. I know it sounds weird to say you need to be good at aiming at long range, but trust me, there is actually a lot of times where I'll see new gunship players miss shots that seemed fairly obvious, but because the enemy moved in a slightly weird way, that threw them off, and unfortunately missed the shot and missed the kill. So you really need to get used to aiming at all ranges. That close range comes with more advanced timing. As you get better at aim, you're just going to become naturally better aiming at close range. The second thing you really need to learn is positioning. This is going to essentially help you avoid the third step, because you're just going to be playing a lot safer than normally. If you're playing with gunship clusters as a team, this kind of changes. You still want to be positioned well, but obviously if you have a bunch of gunships just kind of firing down a lane, people aren't even going to get close to you to begin with, so positioning doesn't matter too much there, unless they're playing gunship v gunship, in which case that match is going to last forever, so that's unfortunate. And the third thing is escaping. That is the number one thing that gunships need to learn. And honestly, that is the final skill that I believe gunships need. And it's the one that I see the least often with gunships. Most gunship players don't really know how to use gunships to escape. The majority of the ones I see do one of two things. They either panic and burn both of their defenses and don't quite escape, or they kind of accept their death and just try and get off a few less shots. Both of these options, believe it or not, are incorrect. The way you want to play gunship when escaping someone is, one, evaluate what you're being chased by. So if it's a scout, strike, whatever, or another gunship. I have seen people run gunships as aggressive ships for some reason. But you need to essentially evaluate what's chasing you and how fast it's going to be going, because this is going to determine how you fly. If it's strike, normally speaking, you are going to space yourself as best you can, swapping to your engine power conversion, or swapping to the engine power state, and using your feedback shield to just kind of dissuade them to shoot you, and then barrel rolling when they fire off their missiles so you can avoid their missile and gain as much distance as possible. Once you have used all these things, you need to find the closest piece of debris and essentially loop them in the debris. One of two things is either going to happen. Either you're actually going to kill them, or they're going to become so annoyed that they just leave you alone. both of these are actually really good outcomes and don't happen as much as you would think. But if one of them does happen, then that's always nice. The other thing that you need to worry about is if you're playing against scouts. Scouts in particular are really hard to actually escape from. Even the best of the best struggle to deal with scouts just because the ones that chase gunships are usually the scout players that know how to fight gunships. Otherwise, you'll see if you're playing against an inexperienced scout, they will just fly straight at you in an attempt to get close enough to you to actually shoot you, and you can pick them off before they even get close to you. But a skilled scout will sneak up on you, and the chances of surviving are a lot lower than you think. So, in that scenario, your best bet is to essentially loop them in a way that you are still gaining space, but you aren't necessarily looping them in a circle in position, because they have better firing arc than you do at all points in time. And by looping them, you're giving them the freest kill of their lives, because they can just space a little bit and just start shooting at you while you're sitting there spinning in circles, hoping they don't kill you. So what you need to do is essentially the same thing as you would against strikes. The difference being, you need to learn to tactically stop. And that sounds silly, but you need to learn to stop your ship, essentially to hide around debris. And when the scout is about to essentially peek over your terrain that you're hiding behind, you need to then swiftly start moving away to let them go past you, so you can continue moving through your terrain and continue to find spot after spot after spot after spot. And while doing this, this is where strafing becomes really important to gunships. You need to learn to strafe behind cover and strafe back. You strafe out, take a pot shot, strafe back in. And you continue this over and over and over again until either the scout leaves you or until the scout is dead. Unfortunately, there is no in between. The scout is either going to kill you or you're going to kill it. There's really no in between. Unfortunately, that is the curse of gunships. Now that I'm on this topic, actually, I'm going to take this opportunity to address I'm not going to call it toxicity because it is warranted, the distaste towards gunships. A lot of people seem to think that gunship players are filthy kill stealers that just sit in the back and will just shoot the lowest health target. And me being a gunship player, I personally take offense to this because I obviously myself and other high tier gunship players know that that's not what's happening. We are prepping our own kills. We are finding good targets. We're taking advantage of scenarios. We're doing everything we possibly can to secure kills and make kills count. Fairly recently, actually, I've had my first 23 kill game. That was on a gunship, and immediately after the fact, I was being mercilessly gone after in the GSF chat in game, and they were going, "Oh, you just sat in the back and you took your kills and blah 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 blah." And I, frankly, to that, I just said, "Whatever keeps you awake or whatever helps you sleep," and then just muted them, because that's really what you have to do. Most people are honestly toxic to gunship players. It is fairly unwarranted because all gunship players are always striving to do their best. It's very hard to play gunship, and a lot of people seem to think it's easy, and challenging them to actually play gunship is not a good idea. I highly recommend, if someone's trying to go after you for playing gunship, never ever tell them to try it. Never tell them to do it themselves, because they're just going to get more upset, because I really hate to say this, but it's usually because they know they can't do well in a gunship. It is a very niche playstyle that not many people use, and the best gunship players are extremely good, and it's usually unfortunate because those same players are usually the ones that get the most anger pointed at them. because it does feel frustrating. Trust me, I'm coming from both ends of the spectrum here. I've been killed by gunships more times than I admit, and I've killed a lot of people as gunships. I'm pretty sure my Quarrel has a decent chunk of kills under its belt now. Let's see here. Gunship, Quarrel. Yeah, I mean, it's got 589. That's after a really long break of GSF. And when I started playing GSF, I never played Gunship. This is recent. You'll notice I only have 15 hours in Gunship, which sounds, I know it's sounds like a lot, but in terms of how long GSF has been out, that's nothing. So 589 is pretty decent. You'll notice I have 869 assists. That's how most gunships end up. So the myth is kind of debunked in people's stats. Most gunship players sincerely won't have, generally speaking, they won't have more kills than assists because it's really hard to get kills on a gunship. Generally speaking, you're either going to get your kill yoinked by another gunship or by just someone else. So solo killing people on gunships is hard. And I do recommend, if you are one of those people that gets killed by a gunship and it feels really bad, please do not go after the gunship player. They are sincerely just trying to play the game, trying to have fun just like you. And gunship is just a different play style. What I recommend, if you really, really, really don't like gunships, and it's funny that I'm saying this in the gunship video, play a scout. Learn scouts, because they are the bane of gunship's existence. As I stated in, I want to say the Quarrel video or this, I honestly don't remember. I've been bulk recording these, so it's kind of hard to track where I've been. The flash fire is the #1 bane of every gunship player's existence, because a good flash fire is impossible to escape. And I say impossible because I also play flash fire. I have been told by the best of the best that they felt like they couldn't do anything because flash fires just do so much damage that if you get in range as a flash fire into a gunship, you're probably gonna like 2-tap them, and it's gonna look like they were made out of like wet tissue paper. So just know that if you're gonna be mad about gunships, please just learn how to play against them. I know that might sound condescending, it might sound whatever, but sincerely, gunship players are just trying to have fun. And this is speaking from experience. It gets pretty old. Trust me, gunship players don't want to hear it, and they certainly don't want to fight you about it. Most of us just kind of sit off of the chat because we don't really want to hear it. There are a lot of people that will quickly say that gunship is not skillful, and it requires a lot more skill than you think. So go out there, play your gunships, have fun, and enjoy GSF. And this honestly was my PSA for the entire series, as this is pretty much getting close to the end. We only have 4 more ships to go, and then 1 more video after that, and that's actually going to end the beginner series. So once we get there, I will potentially continue on. I will potentially not. It's determined based on how I view what else I can teach, because that is entirely what these videos are. This is a culmination of what I can teach people, and not necessarily a culmination of straight facts. This is what I've learned as a GSF player over the years, and it's what I'm aiming to pass on to people. So hopefully this is helping you guys out. I know this was a long rant. I apologize. This won't happen again. Our next video is going to be the Condor, my really hard to explain final gunship. You'll see why when we get there. But for now, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will see you out in the skies.